A single pregnant mother found an old photo of her boss and discovered he was the love of her youth who had vanished. Secrets came to light and their lives changed forever, a story that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and comment on where you are watching from. The December rain hammered against the mirrored windows of the 30th floor like impatient fingers drumming on a table. Down below, New York buzzed with its usual nighttime chaos. Cars honking on Fifth Avenue, pedestrians rushing under awnings, the eternal urban ballet that never slept. But up there, in the cooled silence of the executive office of Johnson & Associates, Sarah Johnson wiped the damp cloth over the CEO's mahogany desk with the same meticulous precision she applied to all her tasks. At 38 years old and 7 months pregnant, Sarah carried the weight of the world on her hunched shoulders and the prominent belly that forced her to lean against the desk with every movement. Her brown hair, always tied in a flawless bun, was beginning to show the first grey strands, a trademark of a life that had never been easy. Her hands, calloused from domestic work since her teenage years, moved with automatic efficiency, cleaning each object as if it were an extension of herself. The aroma of coffee still lingered in the air conditioning, mixed with the scent of leather from the imported chairs and the discreet yet expensive perfume that always permeated that environment. It was a world completely different from hers, a universe of million-dollar decisions made in meetings that lasted longer than she earned in a month. But Sarah did not allow herself to feel bitter. She needed that job more than ever, especially now that the baby would arrive in a few weeks. She was organizing the papers scattered across the desk when she noticed the side drawer was slightly open. Something unusual. Mr. David Johnson was known for his obsession with order and privacy. She hesitated for a moment, nervously biting her lower lip. She shouldn't touch anything personal, but the drawer needed to be cleaned out as well. It was part of her job. As she carefully pulled the drawer open, her eyes fixed on an old photograph that had slid forward. The yellowed paper depicted a typical summer festival, colorful banners, a bonfire in the background, people dancing. But it was the smiling face of a young man that made her heart race violently. "It can't be," she murmured to herself, her hands trembling as she held the photo tighter. It was him. 20 years younger, dark hair tousled by the wind, that same crooked smile that used to make her melt inside. David at 18, wearing a plaid shirt and holding an American flag, just as she remembered from the summer festival at the Church of the Sacred Heart in Brooklyn in 2004. Her legs gave way, and she leaned heavily against the executive chair, feeling a strong contraction cut through her breath. It wasn't the first time she felt these pains. The doctor at the health clinic had warned about stress, but how could she avoid stress when working 16 hours a day just to pay the rent for a room in the outskirts of New York? David! The name slipped from her lips like a painful prayer. 20 years. 2 whole decades had passed since he vanished from her life without a word, without an explanation, leaving only a cold note saying it was for the best. She was 19, hopelessly in love, and pregnant, a pregnancy she lost 2 weeks after he left, perhaps from shock, perhaps from the cruel fate that always seemed to conspire against her happiness. Throughout all those years, while cleaning offices, restaurant kitchens, and the homes of wealthy families, she built an impenetrable emotional armor. She convinced herself that she didn't need anyone, that she could face the world alone. And she did. She finished her studies through a GED program, took a technical course in administration, always fighting to be more than her circumstances allowed. But now, pregnant again, this time with David, an accountant she met in class who moved to Washington, D.C. when he learned of the pregnancy, she felt more vulnerable than ever. And discovering that she had spent the last 8 months cleaning the office of the man who shattered her heart was like receiving a punch in the stomach. The sound of the elevator arriving made her blood run cold. It was almost 11 at night. He never returned to the office after 7. Quickly, she tried to hide the photo, but her hands trembled so much that she dropped it. As she bent down to pick it up, a new contraction made her groan softly. "What the hell?" The deep, familiar voice echoed through the room. Sarah looked up, and there he was. David Johnson, now 39, still dark-haired but slicked back with gel, impeccably tailored suit, tie loosened after a long day. The same man she caught glimpses of in the hallways, who greeted her with a polite but distant "good evening," as if she were just another piece of office furniture. Their eyes met and something changed in the air. The photo was clear in her hands, the image facing him. Sarah saw the exact moment recognition hit those brown eyes she knew so well. "Sarah," he whispered, as if seeing a ghost. She slowly stood up, one hand resting on the desk, the other holding her belly. 20 years of pain, anger, longing, and unrequited love exploded in her throat, but the words refused to come out. Instead, she just stared at him, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. "My God, Sarah, how can you be here?" he stammered, taking a step toward her and then stopping as if fearing she would vanish. "I've been working here for 8 months, her voice came out hoarse, laden with an emotion she was trying to suppress. Sarah took a deep breath. 8 months cleaning your office, and you never recognized me." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael ran his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture he had maintained since youth, and she could see his hands trembling. How was I supposed to know? You looked different, thinner, and now—" His eyes dropped to her belly, and a look of panic crossed his face. "You're pregnant." "Very observant," Sarah replied, sarcastically, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. 7 months. Is it mine?" The question hit her like a slap. Sarah felt the anger bubbling inside her like volcanic lava. "Yours? After 20 years without a word? After leaving me when I needed you the most? Do you think I kept this pregnancy waiting for your return?" "I didn't mean to." "It wasn't like that," he started, but she interrupted him. "Wasn't like that? Then how was it, Michael? Because I remember your little note. It's better this way." 4 words, 20 years of my life, summed up in 4 miserable words. She took a step toward him, and even pregnant, even wearing the simple uniform of a cleaner, there was a fierce dignity in her posture that made him step back. "You want to know how it was? I lost our baby 2 weeks after you left. I had to deal with it alone at 19, while you were probably enjoying your rich life at some private college." Michael visibly paled. "Sarah, I didn't know. If I had known..." "Known what? It doesn't matter now." She shook her head, exhausted. "I need to finish my work. Have a good night, Mr. Mendes." "No," he said firmly, blocking her way. "I'm not letting you walk away again. Not like this. You don't have a choice. I choose now, and I choose to leave." But as she spoke, another contraction hit her, stronger this time, making her bend slightly and let out an involuntary groan. Michael was by her side in seconds, holding her by the arms. "Sarah, are you okay? Do I need to call an ambulance?" "No. It's just practice contractions. The doctor said it's normal," she murmured, but her breathing was quickening. "What doctor? Are you getting proper prenatal care?" The genuine concern in his voice surprised her. For a moment he seemed like the same boy she loved, the one who used to bring her wildflowers and dreamed of changing the world. "I go to the health clinic," she replied, still leaning on him. "It's what I can afford." His face contorted as if he were feeling physical pain. "Sarah, let me help you. Please." "I don't need your help," she lied, pulling away as soon as the contraction passed. "I needed it 20 years ago, not anymore. But I want to help. I want to explain what happened, why I left. Save your explanations for someone who still cares." She walked toward the door, but his voice made her stop. "Sarah?" She turned, reluctant. "The photo? Did you happen to find it?" For a long moment she stared at him. Then, with a bitter smile that didn't reach her eyes, she said, "Happened to. I've known who you were since the first day I set foot in this building, Michael. The question is, why did you never recognize me?" And with those words that echoed through the silent office like a sentence, Sarah left, leaving him alone with the weight of 20 years of regret and the yellowed photo of a love that might never have truly died. The alarm rang at 5 in the morning like every day, but this time Sarah was already awake, staring at the peeling ceiling of her studio apartment in Brooklyn. The night had been tormenting. Between the irregular contractions and the storm of emotions triggered by her encounter with Michael, sleep refused to come. Beside her, in the narrow bed she shared with other cramped furniture in the 15-square-meter room, her adopted daughter Emily slept soundly. Emily was 16 and had entered Sarah's life 3 years ago when social services looked for relatives for the girl after her mother's death. A distant cousin that Sarah barely knew. Without a second thought, she took on the responsibility, even knowing she could barely support herself. The girl had her biological mother's curly hair and the sharp eyes that reminded Sarah of her own youth. "Mum, Sarah, did you sleep?" Emily murmured, half asleep. "You were tossing and turning all night." "Just some work problems, sweetheart. Go back to sleep, it's still early." But Emily sat up, in bed, rubbing her eyes. At 16, she had developed a keen perception for reading Sarah's emotions, a skill born from the need to survive in a world that had never been kind to either of them. "Problems like what? Are you going to lose your job?" The worry in the girl's voice pierced Sarah's heart. Emily had seen too many changes in her short life, and the stability of Sarah's job was one of the few certainties they had. "No, love, it's more complicated than that." Sarah struggled to get up, one hand pressed against her aching back. "Remember when I told you about that guy I dated before you came into my life? The one who disappeared and broke your heart?" Emily grimaced. "That idiot?" Sarah couldn't help but smile weakly at her daughter's youthful indignation. "That's the one. I found out yesterday that he's my boss." Emily's eyes widened. "The rich guy from the 30th floor? The one you say doesn't even look you in the eye?" "He didn't know it was me. At least that's how it seems." Sarah began to get dressed, pulling on the navy blue uniform she had worn for 8 months. "But now he knows. And what are you going to do?" It was the question that had been hammering in Sarah's mind since she left the office the night before. What to do when your most painful past materializes in the form of the man who signs your paychecks? "I'm going to work," she replied as always. "It's what I know how to do." The commute to Fifth Avenue that December morning was a torment. The crowded subway, the suffocating heat, the inevitable jostling, everything seemed to conspire against her already fragile emotional state. Sarah held tightly to the pole, trying to protect her belly from the bumps when her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Sarah, I need to talk to you. Please, give me a chance to explain. Michael." She deleted the message without responding. In the Mendes and Associates building, the morning routine continued as usual. Sarah arrived at 6, as always, and found Mrs. Smith, the cleaning coordinator, distributing the day's tasks. "Sarah, you look terrible," observed Mrs. Smith, a 55-year-old woman who had worked in the building for nearly 2 decades. "Did you sleep poorly?" "Something like that." Sarah grabbed her cleaning cart, checking to see if all the supplies were in order. Mrs. Smith, can I ask you a question? Of course. Do you know Mr. Mendez well? I mean, as a person? Mrs. Smith raised an eyebrow. It was uncommon for any of the cleaning staff to show personal interest in the executives. I've known him since he took over the company from his father about 15 years ago. Why? Just curious. Sarah tried to sound casual. How would you describe him? Serious, workaholic, demanding but fair. I've never seen him take out his anger on the staff. He always delivers on his promises, but he's reserved, you know. I've never seen him with his family, although I know he's married. Mrs. Smith lowered her voice. Between us, he always seemed like a lonely person, despite all the money. Married. The word hit Sarah like a punch in the stomach. She didn't know why it surprised her. Of course, he would be married. A rich, handsome, successful man, probably with kids too. Is his wife beautiful? She asked, before she could stop herself. I've never seen her in person, but I've seen photos in social magazines. Blonde, elegant, one of those who attends charity events, Jessica something. Sarah nodded and headed to the elevators, feeling even more pathetic. What had she expected? That he would spend 20 years waiting for her? That he wouldn't continue his privileged life, marrying someone from his own social class? The 30th floor was quiet when she arrived. It was only 7 in the morning, and the executives rarely showed up before 9. But as she approached Michael's office, she noticed that the light was on. She hesitated in front of the closed door. She could hear his voice on the phone, speaking in a low but tense tone. No, Jessica, I can't go to the charity lunch today. Something important came up at work. No, it's not an excuse. Look, we'll talk later, okay? Sarah lightly knocked on the door and entered, pushing her cart. Michael was sitting behind the desk, still wearing the same clothes from the previous day, as if he had slept in the office. His eyes were red and tired, and there was a cup of cold coffee abandoned next to the phone. Good morning, she said formally, starting to empty the trash cans. Sarah, I'm glad you came. He stood up quickly. I was waiting for you. You shouldn't have. I have work to do. Please, just 5 minutes. I need you to understand what happened. She stopped working and looked at him. Fine. 5 minutes. But then you leave me alone. Michael took a deep breath, as if preparing to dive into deep waters. When I left 20 years ago, it wasn't because I wanted to. It was because my family forced me. Your family? Sarah crossed her arms. You were 19, Michael. You were of age. Of age, but completely financially dependent. On my father. He found out about our relationship and gave me an ultimatum. Either I broke up with you and went to study business in New York, or he would cut me off completely. No money, no college, nothing. And you chose the money. I chose poorly, he exploded, slamming his hand on the table. I chose like a cowardly 19-year-old boy who thought he could come back to you after graduating, after proving to my father that I could be successful without giving up the one I loved. Sarah felt a gentle contraction and placed her hand on her belly. And what changed those plans? My father died in my second year of college. Heart attack. Suddenly I was responsible for a huge company, for hundreds of employees, for a mother in depression. His voice faltered. When I finally managed to stabilize everything and came back to look for you, you had vanished. I asked everyone in Brooklyn. No one knew where you were. I moved to Queens. I needed to get away. There were too many memories. I searched in Queens too. I hired detectives, Sarah. I spent a fortune trying to find you. She studied him carefully. There was a sincerity in his eyes that she remembered from their youth, but 20 years of disillusionment had made her cynical. Why now, Michael? Why tell me this now? Because I never stopped loving you, he said simply. I married Jessica. because it was what was expected of me, because she came from the right family, had the right education. But I never loved her like I loved you, like I still love you." The words hung in the air between them, like a dangerous confession. Sarah felt her resolve waver for a moment, but then she remembered all the pain, all the nights she cried for him, all the times she felt abandoned and inadequate. "You're married," she said firmly, "and I'm pregnant with another man. We're too late, Michael." "No." He stepped closer to her slowly. "It's never too late for true love." "True love," she laughed bitterly. "True love doesn't abandon. True love doesn't give up at the first difficulty. You taught me that 20 years ago. Sarah, the 5 minutes are up." She returned to her work, cleaning the table shook with abrupt movements. "I have 15 more offices to clean before noon." Sarah stood still, watching her work. There was a natural elegance in her movements, a dignity that even the simple uniform couldn't hide. She was thinner than in her youth, her features more defined by a difficult life, but to him she was still the most beautiful woman in the world. "The baby. Who is the father?" Sarah stopped cleaning. "Someone who also left when he found out about the pregnancy. It seems I have a special talent for choosing men who run away from responsibilities." The jab hit its target. Michael closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the comparison. "I'm not going to run away this time. There is no this time. We are nothing to each other anymore except boss and employee." "Sarah, please." She turned to him, and there were tears in her eyes again. "Do you want to know the truth, Michael? I always knew who you were. From the first day I set foot in this building, I saw your photo in the company magazine, read about your business achievements, and still I accepted the job." He stared at her, shocked. "Why?" "Because I needed to see if you would recognize me. I needed to know if I meant anything in your memory or if I was just another girl who passed through your life." Her voice trembled. 8 months, Michael. 8 months I cleaned this office, and you never really looked at me. That tells me everything I need to know about what I represented to you. That's not true." "It is. And do you know what the most pathetic part was? During those 8 months, a foolish part of me still hoped you would recognize me, that you would look at me and remember what we had." Michael moved closer to her, and Sarah could smell his familiar cologne. "I remember everything, Sarah. Your laughter, the way you bit your lip when you were nervous, how your eyes sparkled when you talked about your dreams. I didn't recognize you because I didn't expect to find you here, because the Sarah I knew wanted to be a teacher, wanted to change the world through education, and I couldn't reconcile that memory with a pregnant cleaner," she finished coldly. "With someone whose life hurt her as much as it hurt you." He gently corrected. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything that went unsaid, with 20 years of separate lives and choices that led them down different paths. "I need to finish my work," Sarah finally said. "All right, but this isn't over, Sarah. I'm not going to give up on you again." She didn't respond, but as he left the office, she murmured softly, "You gave up a long time ago, Michael. You just haven't realized it yet." 3 days passed since the confrontation in the office, and Michael couldn't get Sarah out of his mind. Sitting on the balcony of his duplex apartment on the Upper East Side, he watched the city's movement through the bulletproof glass while absent-mindedly fiddling with his laptop. It was Saturday morning, and the sound of traffic mixed with the noise of the building's pool and the laughter of children playing in the playground. Jessica was in the bedroom, getting ready for another of her charity events, this time an afternoon tea to raise funds for an animal shelter. It was the kind of social event she loved: discreet photographers, elegant conversations about noble causes, the chance to wear a new dress and appear in the social column of a magazine. Michael "You sure you don't want to come?" she shouted from the bedroom. "Patricia Abravanel will be there. It would be a great networking opportunity." "I have work to do," he replied automatically, the same excuse he had been using for months to avoid his wife's social events. Jessica appeared on the balcony, impeccable in a light pink dress and Louboutin shoes. At 35, she maintained the sculptural beauty that had made her one of the most sought-after singles in New York before their marriage. Her blonde hair was always impeccable, her skin flawless thanks to the best aesthetic treatments, a smile that had graced magazine covers when she was a model. "You've been acting strange this week," she observed, sitting in the chair next to him. "Did something happen at work?" Michael closed the laptop and studied her. After 12 years of marriage, they had developed a cordial but distant coexistence. Jessica handled the couple's social commitments and public image, while he focused on business. They rarely talked about intimate or personal matters. "Jessica, can I ask you a question?" "Of course." She checked her watch, clearly anxious to leave. "Are you happy? I mean really happy with our marriage?" The question caught her off guard. She blinked a few times, as if processing a complicated equation. "What kind of question is that?" "Of course I'm happy. We have a comfortable life, a good social standing, we travel, we have interesting friends." "But do you love me?" "Michael, what's going on with you? Of course I love you. We've been married for 12 years. But there was something in her voice that sounded automatic, as if she were reciting a memorized text. Michael noticed she had answered without looking him in the eyes. "And what about children?" he pressed. "We've talked about this several times, but you always find an excuse to postpone." Jessica sighed, finally meeting his gaze. "Children change everything, Michael. Our lifestyle, my body, our freedom. I still don't feel ready." At 35, after 12 years of marriage, she still didn't feel ready. Michael nodded, a familiar sadness settling in his chest. "You can go to your event," he said softly. "Have fun." After Jessica left, Michael was left alone with his thoughts. The conversation only confirmed what he already knew. Their marriage was a well-rehearsed act, a convenient social partnership, but there was no true love. There never had been. The phone rang, interrupting his reflections. It was his mother, Mrs. Thompson, calling from the mansion in the Hamptons where, since the death of her husband, Mrs. Thompson had been living alone. "Michael, dear, how are you?" "Hi, Mom. Everything's fine here. I heard you've been asking some strange questions to the employees at the company." Michael frowned. "What kind of questions?" "About that girl, Sarah, the one from Brooklyn." Michael's blood ran cold. "How do you know about that?" "My son. Do you think I don't keep in touch with people at the company? Mrs. Smith called me yesterday, worried. She said you've been asking about a cleaning staff member." Michael clenched his fists. He had forgotten that his mother maintained an informal network of information among the older employees at the company, a remnant of the times when she was more active in the family business. "Mom, that's none of your business." "It is my business." Her voice became stern. "Especially if you're thinking of doing something foolish because of that girl. That girl has a name, and you have no right to speak about her like that." There was a long pause. On the line, and when Mrs. Thompson spoke again, her voice was laced with a coldness that Michael knew well. "Michael, I need to tell you something. Something I've kept for 20 years, but maybe it's time for you to know." "What is it?" "Sarah. She didn't leave New York right after you went to study." Michael felt the world spin around him. "What do you mean?" "She stayed in Brooklyn for 2 more years, and during that time, she tried to reach out to you several times." The revelation hit Michael like a bolt of lightning. "What? That's impossible." "I never received any letters, no calls, because I intercepted everything." The silence that followed was deafening, Michael felt as if the ground had opened beneath his feet. You... what? There were 8 letters, my son. 8 letters in 2 years and 5 phone calls that I personally answered and told her you didn't want to talk to her. Why? Michael's voice came out as a strangled whisper. Why did you do that? To protect you, to protect our family. That girl was from the wrong side of the tracks, Michael. She had no education, no means. She would ruin your future. She loved me, he exploded, and I loved her. Love doesn't pay the bills, Mrs. Thompson shouted back. Love doesn't build empires. You were too young to understand, but I knew that in time you would forget her and find someone suitable, like Jessica. Michael stood up from his chair, pacing the balcony like a caged animal. The letters. What did you do with them? I kept them. You kept them, he repeated, incredulous. They're in the safe at home. I thought that maybe one day, if you found out, it would be better to have some proof. That I didn't throw them away completely. I'm going to get them now. Michael, listen. Now! He yelled, hanging up the phone. The trip to the Hamptons had never felt so long. In the traffic on the Long Island Expressway, Michael called Sarah. The phone rang several times before she answered. Hello? Sarah, it's me. I need to talk to you urgently. Michael, I already told you that. My mother intercepted your letters. The silence on the other end was total. What letters? She finally asked, but her voice was different. The letters you sent me after I left. 8 letters in 2 years. She took them all and never delivered them to me. And the calls, too. She answered and said, I didn't want to talk to you. Michael heard a muffled sound, as if Sarah was stifling a sob. Sarah, are you there? I'm here, she whispered. Where are you? I need to see you. I'm at home, but Michael, give me your address, please. She hesitated for a long moment. 847 Perdizes Street, Brooklyn. It's a studio apartment. It's not easy to find. I'll find it. I'm going to the Hamptons first to get the letters. Then I'll come to you. Michael, I don't know if that's a good idea. Please, Sarah, 20 years. 20 years I thought you had forgotten me, that you didn't care about me. I need to know the truth. At his mother's house, Michael found Mrs. Thompson waiting in the living room, the letters organized on a silver tray on the coffee table. She looked like she had aged a decade in the last 2 hours. Before you read them, she began, I want you to understand that I did everything out of love, for the love of our family, for your future. No, Michael interrupted, grabbing the letters. You did it for control, for prejudice, for believing you could decide my life for me. The letters were in yellowed envelopes, written in Sarah's careful handwriting that he remembered from the notes she used to leave in his school notebooks. The first one arrived 3 months after you left, Mrs. Thompson continued, ignoring his tone. It said she was pregnant. Michael froze. Pregnant? She lost the baby a few weeks later. It's in the second letter. With trembling hands, Michael opened the first letter. It was dated March 2005. Michael, I know. You said it was better this way, but I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant. It's our child. I don't know what to do. I'm scared, and you're the only person I can trust. Please, call me. Please don't leave me alone now. I love you. Sarah. The second letter, from May of the same year, was stained as if tears had fallen on the paper. Michael, I tried to call, but your mother said you didn't want to talk to me. I understand, but I need to tell you that I lost our baby. It was 2 weeks ago. The doctor said it was due to stress. I know you don't want anything to do with me anymore, but I thought you should know. I've always loved you. Sarah. Michael felt his legs give way and leaned against the wall. In the following letters, Sarah spoke about the studies she was trying to continue, about the job she'd gotten at a diner, about the sleepless nights thinking of him. In the 5th letter, she mentioned that, Michael was considering moving from New York. The last letter was from August 2007, 2 years after his departure. Michael, this is my last attempt. I'm moving to Queens next week. I got a job at a school, and I'm going to try to fulfill my dream of being a teacher, even if it's just as an assistant for now. I know you've moved on with your life, and I hope you're happy. Maybe one day we'll run into each other somewhere and can talk like old friends. I will never forget what we had. With love, Sarah. When he finished reading, Michael was openly crying. 20 years of misunderstandings, unnecessary pain, lives that could have been completely different. I will never forgive you for this, he said to his mother, his voice laden with a coldness she had never heard before. Michael, you need to understand. I understand perfectly. You destroyed our lives because you thought you knew better than us what was good for me. And I was right, she exploded. Look where you are. Look what you've achieved. If you had stayed with her, you'd be living in some rundown neighborhood working any job. Michael stared at her with a mix of pity and disgust. You're right, Mother. I've achieved a lot. I have money, a successful company, a beautiful wife who doesn't truly love me. And you know what? I'm completely unhappy every day of my life. He took the letters and headed for the door. Michael, where are you going? To do what I should have done 20 years ago. Fight for the woman I love. She's pregnant with another man. Michael stopped at the door, turning one last time to his mother. And you think that matters? After everything you took from me, after 20 years of pain you both went through because of your actions. If she takes me back, I will love that. Baby, as if it were my own child, because that's what you do when you truly love someone. The drive back to New York was a blur of conflicting emotions. Michael drove on autopilot, Sarah's letters on the passenger seat like a silent accusation. How many times had she tried to reach out? How many nights had she cried alone, thinking he didn't care? When he finally arrived at Perdizes Street, the sun was setting. The studio apartment was exactly as he had imagined. A set of small rooms squeezed into a narrow lot, clothes hanging on lines crisscrossing. The yard, children playing between the apartments. It was a world completely different from his, but there was nothing there that intimidated him. All that mattered was finding Sarah. He knocked on the door of number 847, and a curly-haired teenager with curious eyes answered. You must be the idiot, she said bluntly. Excuse me? The idiot who broke my mother's heart 20 years ago. She told me about you. Michael blinked, surprised by the girl's frankness. You must be Emily. And you must be Michael. She's been crying since you called. Can I talk to her? Emily studied him for a moment, then shouted over her shoulder, Mom, Sarah! Your rich ex-boyfriend is here looking like a lost puppy. Emily! Came Sarah's voice from inside the room. What? It's true! Sarah appeared at the door, her eyes red from crying. Even with her swollen face and wearing a simple nightgown, she was still the most beautiful woman Michael had ever seen. Hi, he said simply. Hi. I brought your letters. He extended the envelope with the 8 letters, and Sarah stared at him as if it were a bomb about to explode. Did you read them? I read them. All. Then you know. About our baby. About everything you went through alone, about how my mother destroyed our lives. Sarah took the letters with trembling hands and pressed them against her chest. 20 years, she whispered. 20 years I thought you didn't care about me, and I thought you had forgotten me. They stared at each other in the silence of the falling night, 2 lives shattered by lies and misunderstandings, finally face to face with the truth. Michael, Sarah finally said, I don't know if we can go back. I don't know if we can fix 20 years of pain. I don't know either, he admitted, but I know I need to try. I deserve at least a chance to try. Emily, who had been listening at the door, cleared her throat loudly. Excuse me, folks, but my mom is pregnant and has been standing for a long time. Don't you think you should continue this conversation sitting down? And for the first time in days, Sarah smiled genuinely. Sarah's apartment was smaller than the garage of Michael's house in the Hamptons, but it was impeccably organized. 2 beds shared the space with a small kitchen, a folding table, and a makeshift shelf made of bricks and wooden boards. The walls were decorated with family photos, Sarah and Emily at various moments, some old pictures from Sarah's childhood, and drawings that looked like they were made by small children. Michael sat in the plastic chair Emily offered, feeling out of place but determined to stay. The contrast between that environment and his luxurious life was stark, but there was a sense of home there that his mansion had never provided. "Want some coffee?" Sarah offered, moving around the tiny kitchen with the familiarity of someone who knew every inch of the space. "Please." She brewed the coffee in a cloth filter, the strong aroma filling the room. Her movements were careful due to the pregnancy, and Michael noticed how she occasionally rested a hand on her back. "When is it due?" he asked, gesturing to her belly. "Late January. 6 weeks to go." "And is everything okay? The prenatal care, the baby's health?" Sarah paused in her coffee preparation. "It is. Everything is fine with the baby. As for me, well, the doctor said I need to reduce stress and work less, but you need the money," he completed. "Yes." Emily, who was sitting on the bed pretending to study, interrupted the conversation. "Mom Sarah works 16 hours a day. In the morning at her building, in the afternoon at her family's house in the Upper West Side, and 3 times a week she still cleans a medical office at night." Michael felt a stab in his chest. "Sarah, this is madness. You're 7 months pregnant." "I need to save money for when the baby is born," she replied defensively. "I'm going to have to take at least 2 months off work. And the father of the child, doesn't he help at all?" The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Sarah served the coffee and sat on the edge of the bed, avoiding Michael's gaze. "David is an accountant," she finally said. "I met him in the night technical course I took. We dated for 8 months." "And when did you break up?" "When I told him I was pregnant. He had just gotten a promotion in Washington, D.C. He said he wasn't ready to be a father, that he was too young to take on that responsibility." "How old is he?" 32. Michael shook his head in disbelief. 32 years old and not ready to be a father? "Just like you at 19, Emily commented sarcastically, not looking up from her book. "Emily," Sarah reprimanded her. "It's true, isn't it? You both ran away when you found out I was having a baby." Michael stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the backyard of the studio apartment. Down below, some women were gathered around a plastic table, peeling vegetables and chatting animatedly. Children ran among them, their laughter echoing through the yard. "She's right," he said without turning around. "I ran away. And because of my cowardice, you went through everything alone. You were 19, and you were the same age." He turned around abruptly. "You faced the pregnancy, the loss of our baby, the pain, everything alone, and you still managed to study, work, and become an amazing person, while I lived in a gilded bubble, pretending I was building something important." Sarah sipped her coffee, studying his face. "You built something important. Your company employs hundreds of people. My company exploits people like you," he said bitterly, "pays low wages, offers minimal conditions, while I live like a king." "Then change that." "How?" "You're the owner, aren't you? Change it." It was a devastating simplicity. Michael had spent years studying complex economic theories, sophisticated market strategies, but he had never thought of the most obvious solution: just do what was right. Michael's phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Jessica. "Hi, love. Where are you? I got back from the event and you're not here." Michael looked at Sarah, who was observing the conversation with a neutral expression. "I'm taking care of some work matters." "On a Saturday night? Michael, we had dinner planned at Fasano with the Andrades, remember?" He had completely forgotten. It was the kind of social commitment that filled every weekend of his life. Elaborate dinners with empty conversations about business and high society gossip. "Jessica, I need to cancel." "Cancel?" "This is very important for Alberto. He wants to discuss that partnership. I'll call him tomorrow." "Michael, what's going on with you? You've been acting very strange." Sarah got up and went to the kitchen, pretending not to be listening, but Michael noticed the tension in her shoulders. "Jessica, when I get home, we need to talk." "Talk about what?" "About our marriage." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Our marriage? Michael, you're scaring me." "You don't need to be scared, just... we need to talk, okay?" "Okay, I'll wait for you here." Michael hung up and found Sarah looking at him with an unreadable expression. "Are you going to tell her about us?" "I'll tell her that I don't love her, and that I can't pretend to love her anymore." "Michael," Sarah approached him, her hand resting on her belly. "You've been married for 12 years. You have a life built with her. You can't throw it all away because of a ghost from the past." "Ghost?" he repeated, hurt. "Is that what we are? A ghost? We are two people who loved each other when we were young and naive. That was 20 years ago. And what I feel for you now? What do you feel for me? Is that also a ghost?" Sarah looked away. "What I feel doesn't matter. You're married. I'm pregnant by another man. There's no possible future for us. There is, if we want to build it." "At what cost, Michael? You're going to destroy your marriage. I'm going to complicate my already difficult life even more. And in the end, we might discover that the love we felt was just teenage infatuation." Emily, who had been silent until then, slammed the book shut. "You two are idiots." "Emily," Sarah reprimanded her, "no, it's true. You've spent 20 years suffering because of each other. Now you have the chance to be together, and you're making 1,000 excuses not to try. It's not that simple." "It is. He doesn't love his wife. You haven't forgotten him. David doesn't even want to know about the baby." "What's the complicated part?" "The part where two adults take responsibility for their own choices," Sarah said firmly. "I chose to have this baby knowing I would be a single mother. I chose to work hard to support my family. I can't just change everything because Prince Charming showed up." "I'm not any Prince Charming," Michael said softly. "I'm just a man who made the biggest mistake of his life at 19 and spent the last 20 trying to convince himself that he was happy. And if it doesn't work out, what if we try and find out that we're very different people now? Then at least we tried. At least we won't spend the rest of our lives wondering what if." Sarah sat heavily in the chair, one hand massaging her temples. "I need to think, Michael. This is all too much to process in just a few days." "I understand. But Sarah, one thing I need you to know, no matter what your decision is about us, I won't let you go through this pregnancy alone. I won't let you work 16 hours a day until the baby is born. I don't need your charity. It's not charity, it's a debt for everything. For you went through alone 20 years ago, for everything my family put you through. Let me at least try to make up for that." Emily looked between the two adults and sighed dramatically. "Mom, Sarah, accept his help. You work like a dog, and I'm worried about you and the baby. Emily, no, let me speak. You always taught me that pride doesn't put food on the table. And you also taught me that when someone offers you sincere help, you accept it with dignity." Michael smiled despite the tension of the moment. "Your daughter is very wise. She may Not be my biological daughter, but she's smarter than I am, Sarah admitted with a sigh. All right, Michael, I accept temporary financial help, but it's not a gift. I will pay it all back when I can. Sarah, it's this way, or I won't accept anything. Okay, your way. Michael's phone rang again. This time it was his mother. Michael, where are you? Jessica called me. She's desperate. She said you talked about ending the marriage. Michael closed his eyes. Mom, that's none of your business. It is my business. You can't destroy your life because of that. Watch what you're about to say, he interrupted her, his voice cold. I'm at Sarah's place right now, and she can hear you. You're at her place? Michael, you've completely lost your mind. No, Mom, I'm finding my mind for the first time in 20 years. If you leave Jessica, it will be a scandal. Think about the company's image, our reputation. I'm thinking about my happiness for the first time in my life. Happiness doesn't pay the bills. You've already said that. And you know what? You're wrong. Money without happiness is worthless. He hung up the phone and put it on. Silent. Sarah was watching the conversation with a worried expression. Your family won't accept this easily. My family will have to learn to accept my decisions, whether they like it or not. And your marriage? Your company? Are you sure you want to risk all of that? Michael knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. Sarah, 20 years ago I chose security over love. I chose what was expected of me instead of what my heart wanted, and those were the emptiest 20 years of my life. He gently kissed her hands, feeling the rough skin from work, the calluses from hours of cleaning. I won't make the same mistake twice, no matter what it costs. And what if I say I don't want to try, that I'd rather be alone? Michael looked her in the eyes, seeing the same fear he felt reflected there. Then I will respect your decision, but I won't stop loving you, and I won't stop being here if you change your mind. Tears ran down Sarah's face. Why didn't you say these things 20 years ago? Because 20 years ago I was a scared boy. Today I'm a man who knows exactly what he wants. Emily, who had been silently observing the whole scene, cleared her throat. Well, if you two are done with your Mexican soap opera scene, how about we think of practical things, like where are you going to meet to talk properly? Because this room is too small for so much drama. And despite everything, the tension, the tears, the complexity of the situation, the three laughed together. And in that moment, Michael felt something he hadn't felt in decades. The sensation of being home. The duplex apartment in the Upper East Side had never seemed so cold and silent. Michael arrived home shortly after midnight and found Jessica waiting in the living room, still wearing the pink dress from the charity event, but with smudged makeup and disheveled hair. She held a glass of red wine, something unusual, as she rarely drank at home. "Where have you been?" she asked, without getting up from the Italian leather sofa. Michael took off his jacket and hung it on the back of an armchair, buying time to organize his thoughts. The conversation he was about to have would change everything, and there was no turning back. I was talking to someone important. Someone important enough for you to cancel our dinner with the Andersons without explanation? Jessica, I need to tell you something. She finally looked at him, and Michael saw fear in her eyes. Despite the coldness of their marriage, they had built a comfortable and predictable life. Change scared them both. "Are you having an affair?" she asked directly. "No, it's not an affair." "Then what is it?" Michael sat in the armchair facing her, his hands resting on his knees. "Do you remember I told you I had a serious girlfriend before you, when I was younger?" "Vaguely. You said it was a teenage thing." "It wasn't just a teenage thing. I loved her, a lot." Jessica took a sip of wine, studying her husband's face. "Did you love her like you love me?" The question hung in the air like an undetonated bomb. Michael took a deep breath. Jessica, you and I, we married for other reasons. You know that. What reasons? Convenience, social standing, because our families approved, because it made sense on paper. And love? Was there never love? Michael studied her carefully. There was pain in her voice, but also a strange sense of relief. There was affection, mutual respect, companionship, but love, true love, the kind that keeps you awake at night and makes you want to be a better person. No. Jessica nodded slowly, as if confirming something Michael had always known. And her? Your ex-girlfriend. Did you see her? Yes. And do you still love her? Yes. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 12 years of polite lies and social conventions. Does she love you too? I don't know. It's complicated. Jessica laughed, a bitter and joyless sound. I can imagine. It must be complicated to love someone after so long. Why aren't you yelling at me? Why aren't you throwing things? Because, she paused, sipping more wine, because I never really loved you either. The confession hit Michael like a punch to the stomach, even though he had suspected it for years. What do you mean? Michael, I married you because you were safe, wealthy, stable, from a good family. My parents adored you, but I never felt that crazy thing people talk about when it comes to love. And didn't you think we should have talked about this before? And did you think, she shot back, how many times in the last 12 years did you stop to think if we were truly happy? She was right. They had both entered that marriage knowing, even if unconsciously, that it wasn't based on passion. So what do we do now? Michael asked. Jessica finished her wine and placed the glass on the coffee table with a definitive gesture. We divorce, civilly. Just like that? Just like that. We've already wasted 12 years pretending. Let's not waste any more. Michael stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights below. It was liberating and terrifying at the same time. Jessica, are you going to be okay? Financially, I mean? I'll be fine. I have my own investments, and I assume you'll be fair in the division of assets. Of course. And Michael? He turned to her. I hope you find happiness. Truly. I deserve a husband who loves me for real, and you deserve to be with someone who makes you happy. The next morning, Sunday, Michael woke up in the guest room. Jessica had suggested they sleep apart to start adjusting to the new reality. He was having coffee on the balcony when his phone rang. Mr. Michael? It was an unfamiliar female voice. This is from the General Hospital. Are you the emergency contact for Sarah Johnson? Michael's blood ran cold. I am. What happened? She was admitted in the early hours with premature contractions. She is stable now, but needs to be monitored. I'm on my way. Michael left the house without even notifying Jessica, driving dangerously fast through the empty Sunday morning streets. At the hospital, he found Emily in the maternity ward hallway, sitting in a plastic chair with red eyes from crying. Emily, what happened? She started having very strong contractions at 3 a.m. I thought the baby was coming. I called the ambulance service. How is she now? Sedated. The doctor said the baby is fine, but she needs complete bed rest until the birth. No work, no stress. And where are you going to stay? How will you support yourselves? Emily looked at him with an expression much older than her 16 years. I don't know. The rent for the studio apartment is due next week, and without her money. You're staying with me. What do you mean? You're going to stay at my house until the baby is born and Sarah recovers. She'll never accept that. Then I won't give her a choice. Emily studied his face for a moment. You really love her, don't you? More than anything. And your wife? How will she react to two people living in her house? Michael sat down next to Emily in the cold hospital hallway. Jessica and I are getting divorced. She already knows about Sarah. Wow. Emily nodded slowly. So you're serious. Completely serious. Can I ask you a question? Sure. Why do you love my mum so much? I mean, you were apart for 20 years. How do you know you're not confusing nostalgia with love? It was a surprisingly mature question, coming from a teenager. Because when I'm with her, I remember who I really am. Not the successful businessman, not the perfect husband pretending to be someone he's not. Just me. And who are you, really? Michael smiled for the first time since he arrived at the hospital. Someone who wants to make a difference in the world. Someone who cares more about people than profits. Someone your mom helped me become when we were young. And now? Now I want to be that person again. For her, for you, for this baby that's coming, for myself. A nurse approached them. Family of Sarah Johnson. She's waking up and asking to see you. Sarah looked pale and visibly tired, but her eyes lit up when she saw Michael and Emily enter the room. How did you know? You put me down as your emergency contact, Michael said, pulling a chair closer to the bed. That was 8 months ago when I started working at the company. I forgot to change it. Good thing you forgot. Mum Sarah, Michael said we're going to stay at his house, Emily announced bluntly. Emily, we already talked about this. Sarah, Michael interrupted, the doctor said you need complete bed rest. No work, no stress. How are you going to achieve that in the studio apartment? I'll manage. You'll be unemployed, without money to pay rent, worried about bills. That's the opposite of rest. Sarah closed her eyes, clearly exhausted. Michael, I can't go to your house. Your wife, Jessica, and I are separating. Her eyes opened wide. What? We talked last night. It was a mutual decision. Because of me, because of us, but mainly because neither of us was happy in that marriage. Michael, Sarah, I'm not asking you to make any decisions about us right now. I'm just asking you to let me take care of you and the baby, like I should have done 20 years ago. And what if people talk? What if they think that I'm helping a pregnant employee who needed to be hospitalized? Let them talk. Emily approached her mother's bed. Mother Sarah, you always taught me that sometimes we need to swallow our pride to do what's best for the family. This baby needs you to rest. I need to be sure you will be okay. Sarah looked between Michael and Emily, two of the most important people in her life, pleading with her to make the sensible choice. And if I agree, she said slowly, what are the rules? There are no rules, Michael replied. Just one condition, you rest. No working, no worrying about money, no stress. For how long? Until you're ready to decide what you want to do with your life. And then you decide if you want to try to build something with me or if you'd prefer to move on with your life. No pressure, no obligations. Sarah closed her eyes again, a tear rolling down her cheek. All right, I accept. Emily smiled and kissed her mother's forehead. You made the right choice. I hope so, Sarah murmured. Michael took her hand, intertwining their fingers. I will take care of you both, I promise. And I promise not to be a burden. Sarah, he said gently, you could never be a burden to me. You are the best thing that has ever happened in my life. From the hallway, the sound of babies crying in the maternity ward, nurses chatting, families gathered around new beginnings filled the air. And there, in room 304, 3 people whom life had hurt began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they deserved a second chance at happiness. Michael, Sarah whispered. Yes? Thank you. For what? For not giving up on us, not yet. Michael's mansion in the Hamptons felt like an alien world to Emily. The teenager walked through the 40-square-meter living room, observing the expensive paintings on the walls, the designer furniture, and the crystal chandelier that cost more than she and Sarah earned in an entire year. "Oh my God," she murmured, stopping in front of the 70-inch television. "This is bigger than our room." Michael was carrying the few bags of the two women, 2 old backpacks and a patched fabric suitcase containing all of Sarah's earthly belongings. The disparity between the wealth of the house and the simplicity of their belongings hit him like a punch to the gut. Sarah was sitting on the leather sofa, still pale from the shock of the hospital, observing everything with a mix of discomfort and fascination. She had left the maternity ward with strict medical orders: complete rest, avoid stress, weekly checkups until the baby was born. "Jessica has already left?" she asked, noticing the absence of feminine personal items in the decor. "She's staying at her sister's house while she organizes an apartment for herself. We decided it would be better not to create awkward situations." "Awkward for whom?" Emily asked with her usual bluntness. "For everyone," Michael admitted. "Jessica is a good person, but this is all very complicated." The doorbell rang, interrupting the conversation. Michael went to answer and returned with a middle-aged man wearing a medical coat. "This is Dr. Henry Smith," Michael introduced, "private obstetrician. He came to examine you and review your pregnancy history." "Michael," Sarah protested, "I have a doctor in the public health system. I don't need—" "You do," he gently interrupted her. "Dr. Henry is the best obstetrician in New York, and it's all already paid for." "I can't accept this." "You can and you will," Emily said firmly. "Mother Sarah, you almost lost the baby yesterday. Stop being stubborn." Dr. Henry approached Sarah with a professional smile. "Mrs. Sarah, may I examine you? I just want to check if everything is all right after yesterday's episode." Reluctantly, Sarah accepted the examination. The doctor had brought portable ultrasound equipment, and soon the sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the quiet room. "Everything is normal," he announced after a few minutes. "Healthy baby, developing perfectly. But the mother is clearly exhausted. How many hours were you working each day?" 16, Sarah admitted quietly. 16 hours pregnant and 7 months along? My lady, that's madness. Your body was at its limit. I needed to work." "I understand. But now you need to rest. Rest is not a suggestion, it's a medical order. Any physical effort could trigger premature labor." After the doctor left, promising to return in a week, an uncomfortable silence settled between the three. "Michael," Sarah finally said, "I need you to understand one thing. I'm not a porcelain doll. I've always worked. I've always supported myself. I don't know how to live without doing anything." "It's not doing nothing. It's taking care of yourself and the baby." "But what about afterward? When the baby is born, what will I do with my life?" It was a question Michael had been avoiding, but needed to be faced. "How about we go back to your original dream?" he suggested. "You wanted to be a teacher, remember?" "Michael, that was 20 years ago. I barely finished high school. Then finish college. Education, literature, whatever you want, and then work as a teacher. With what money? Private college costs a fortune. I'll pay." "No!" She shot up abruptly, one hand on her belly. "I'm not going to become your charity project." Emily, who had been exploring the open kitchen, returned to the living room holding an apple. "You two are arguing about the wrong thing," she said, taking a bite of the fruit. "What do you mean?" Michael asked. "You're discussing money and work, but no one is talking about what really matters." "Which is?" Sarah wanted to know. "Whether you two are going to try dating again or not." The silence that followed was absolute. Michael and Sarah exchanged glances, both feeling the weight of the question they had been avoiding. "Emily, it's complicated," Sarah began. "It's not. You either love each other or you don't. Simple as that." "It's not simple," Michael said. "I separated, But Sarah is pregnant with another man. There's Emily to take care of, a whole life built without me. And you have a business to run, an ex-wife to divorce, a family. That will freak out when you find out you're living with two poor people, Sarah added. Emily finished the apple and threw the core in the trash. Okay, then I'll sort this out for you guys. She planted herself in the middle of the living room, looking back and forth between Michael and Sarah. Michael, do you love my mother? I do. Sarah, do you love him? Sarah hesitated, biting her lip nervously. It's complicated. It's not complicated. Do you love him or not? Yes, Sarah whispered. I do. Good. Now that we've established that, let's get to the impractical part. Michael, do you want to be the father of the baby that isn't yours? I do, he replied without hesitation. Sarah, do you accept him as the father of your child? If he really wants to. I do, Michael confirmed. I really do. Great. Michael, do you want Sarah to be your wife, even though she's poor and has a spoiled adopted daughter? I do, and you're not spoiled. Sarah, do you want him as your husband, even though he's rich and has a boring family? Sarah laughed through the tears that were starting to fall. I do. Then it's settled. You guys will date, get married when the time is right, and raise the baby together, and I'll get a rich dad who will pay for my college. Emily, Sarah scolded her, but she was smiling. What? I'm being practical. Someone has to be in this family. Michael stepped closer to Sarah, carefully taking her hands. She's right, you know, about everything. About me being poor. About us loving each other. The rest we'll figure out. And your family? Your company? People are going to talk. Sarah, he interrupted, kissing her hands. I spent 20 years living the way others expected, married to who they approved of, working how they told me to, being who they thought I should be. And I was completely unhappy. And what if we're happy together, and it still doesn't work out? Then at least we tried. At least we won't spend another 20 years asking what if. Michael's phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was his personal assistant. Mr. Michael, sorry to bother you on a Sunday, but there's been a leak to the press about your separation. The newspapers are calling for comments. Michael closed his eyes, feeling the weight of reality returning. What kind of leak? Someone saw you leaving the courthouse where you filed for divorce. There are photos. All right, don't make any comments. I'll deal with it tomorrow. He hung up and found Sarah and Emily watching him with concern. It's already started, he said simply. What? Sarah asked. The press, the gossip, the questions. And does that bother you? Michael studied her. Simple hair tied back in a ponytail, wearing an old t-shirt and faded maternity pants, no makeup, sitting on a couch that cost more than she earned in 2 years. No, he finally said. It doesn't bother me at all. Are you sure? Absolutely. In fact, I think it's time to make everything clear to everyone. Michael, don't do anything crazy. It's not crazy, it's honesty. He picked up the phone and dialed his assistant. Marina, I want you to organize a press conference for tomorrow at 10 in the morning. I'm going to make an official statement about changes in my personal and professional life. Mr. Michael, are you sure? Maybe it's better to wait. I'm absolutely sure, and Marina, after the conference, I want a meeting with the entire board of directors. We're going to make some important changes in the company. When he hung up, Sarah was staring at him with a mix of admiration and terror. Are you really going to do this? Publicly acknowledge our relationship? I'm going to do more than that. I'm going to admit that I fell in love with the bravest woman I know, that I'm looking forward to being the father of her baby, and that I intend to completely change the way my company treats its employees. And if that ruins your career? Michael knelt in front of her, his hands gently resting on her belly. "Sarah, you worked 16 hours a day while pregnant to support your family. You raised a girl who wasn't your biological daughter because it was the right thing to do. You faced 20 years alone, built a life with dignity despite all the hardships." He looked into her eyes, seeing the strength that had always impressed him. "If you can be that brave, I can at least try to be half the man you deserve." "Michael." "Hey," Emily interrupted from across the room, where she was fiddling with his tablet. "Did you know there are already pictures of you on the internet?" "What?" Michael and Sarah said together. "Someone photographed you leaving the hospital today. The caption says, 'Businessman Michael Mendez with new pregnant girlfriend after announcing divorce.'" Sarah paled. "Are they already calling me a gold digger?" "Actually," Emily continued reading, "they're speculating if the baby is yours, Michael." "Great," he sighed. "Tomorrow is going to be quite a day." "Michael," Sarah said softly, "there's still time to change your mind. No one will judge you if you decide this is too complicated." He stood up and went to the window, looking out at the immaculate gardens of his property. Out there, everything was perfect, controlled, without surprises. It was exactly how his life had been for 20 years, beautiful on the surface, but empty inside. "You know when I was sure I wanted to be with you?" he said without turning around. "When?" "When you told me you always knew who I was, but you stayed silent for 8 months, testing if I would recognize you. At that moment, I realized you had given me a chance to prove that I had changed, that I was worth it." He turned to her, smiling. "And I also realized that I failed miserably at the test, but you're giving me a second chance, and this time I won't fail. And if you fail, I won't fail, because this time I know exactly what's at stake. What is? My happiness, our happiness, and the chance for our family to be happy." "Our family?" Sarah repeated, touching her belly. "Our family," he confirmed. "You, me, Emily, the baby, and any other that comes along." Emily dropped the tablet and threw herself onto the couch between the two. "Well, if we're going to be an official family, I have some demands." "What are they?" Michael asked, amused. "First, I want a room just for me. Second, I want to continue studying at the same school so I don't lose my friends. Third, you're going to have to learn how to make spaghetti because it's Sarah's favorite food." "Done, done. And can I hire a chef?" "No, it has to be you. It's part of the charm of having a stepfather." Michael looked at Sarah, who was smiling for the first time since they had reunited. "Stepfather?" he repeated. "If you're going to marry my mother, you'll be my stepfather. Unless you prefer I keep calling you rich guy. I think I prefer stepfather." And as the three laughed together in the luxurious living room, starting to imagine what their life as a family would be like, outside, photographers were already positioning themselves at the gates of the mansion, eager to capture more images of the romance that was about to become national news. The media storm was just beginning, but for the first time in 20 years, Michael felt ready to face anything, as long as it was alongside Sarah. The conference room of Mendez and Associates had never received so many journalists. At 10 in the morning on Monday, more than 40 press professionals were crammed into the space that usually accommodated 15 people for board meetings. Television cameras, digital recorders, cell phones pointed, all eagerly awaiting the statement that promised to reveal details about the personal life of New York's most reserved businessman. Michael entered the room wearing an impeccable navy suit, but there was something different about his posture. The formal rigidity that always characterized him had given way to genuine calm. Behind him, Marina, his assistant for 10 years, carried a folder with documents and a barely concealed expression of nervousness. "Good morning," he began, adjusting the microphone. "Thank you all for being here. I know there are speculations about changes in my personal life, and I prefer to clarify the facts directly." The cameras clicked frantically as he paused, organizing his thoughts. "Yesterday, my wife Jessica and I formalized our consensual divorce after 12 years of marriage. There was no infidelity, scandal, or any inappropriate behavior from either party. We simply recognized that we were incompatible and that we both deserved the chance to seek genuine happiness." A journalist from the New York Times raised her hand immediately. "Mr. Mendez, there are photos of you leaving the General Hospital with a pregnant woman. Can you comment on that?" Michael took a deep breath. It was the moment of truth. "I can and will. Sarah Johnson has been an employee of this company for 8 months, working in the cleaning department, but before she was my employee, she was the woman I loved when I was 19. The ensuing murmur was audible. Michael continued, his voice steady. 20 years ago, under family pressure and my own immaturity, I ended our relationship to follow the path my family deemed appropriate. It was the biggest mistake of my life." "Mr. Mendez," interrupted a reporter from the Wall Street Journal, "are you confirming a romantic relationship with a subordinate employee? Doesn't that constitute workplace harassment?" "There is no subordination because Sarah no longer works for the company. She stepped away on medical advice due to a high-risk pregnancy. And I want to make it clear, I did not know it was her during the 8 months she worked here. She recognized me, but chose to remain silent." "Why?" shouted a reporter from Vogue. Michael smiled for the first time since the beginning of the press conference. "Because she wanted to see if I would recognize her, if I truly cared about her in the past. Shamefully, I failed that test for 8 long months." "And the baby?" someone from the back asked. "Is it your child?" "Not biologically. Sarah is expecting a child from another relationship, but I intend to raise that child as if it were my own, if she allows me." The buzz increased. A situation like that, a millionaire businessman publicly acknowledging a relationship with a pregnant cleaner from another man, was headline material for weeks. "Mr. Mendez," a journalist from CNN stood up, "how is your family reacting to this decision?" The question touched a sensitive nerve. Michael had received dozens of furious calls from his mother since Sunday night, each one more hysterical than the last. "My family is processing the information," he said diplomatically. "But I am an adult man capable of making my own decisions about love and happiness." "And about the company?" asked an economic reporter. "How are investors reacting?" "That brings me to the second reason for this press conference," Michael said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "I intend to implement significant changes in the way our company operates." He took a document from Marina's folder. "Starting this week, all cleaning, security, and general service employees will have their salaries increased by 40%. We will implement a comprehensive health plan for all employees and their families, regardless of their position. And we will create a scholarship program for employees who wish to pursue professional qualifications." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a radical change for a traditionally conservative company. "Mr. Mendez," an economic journalist asked, "won't this significantly impact your profits?" "Yes, it will, and that's exactly the point. Profit at any cost is no longer our goal. We want to be a company that treats its employees as dignified human beings, not as numbers on a spreadsheet." "Does this change relate to your personal relationship?" Michael paused, carefully considering his response. "Sarah showed me a perspective that I had lost. For 8 months, she cleaned my office, working 16 hours a day to support her family. Pregnant, exhausted, but always with dignity and excellence in her work. That made me question whether the way I ran my company was ethical. And the shareholders, Did they approve these changes? I am the majority shareholder, but I called an extraordinary meeting this afternoon. If there is significant opposition, I will buy out the dissenting shareholders. It was a risky and expensive move, but Michael had spent the night calculating. He had enough resources to buy out the minority shareholders if necessary. A journalist from the New York Times asked the question everyone was waiting for. "Mr. Mendez, are you going to marry Sarah Johnson?" Michael smiled, and for the first time in years, his smile seemed genuinely happy. "If she accepts me, yes. But first she needs to recover from childbirth and decide if she really wants to spend the rest of her life with someone who took 20 years to mature. And what if she says no? Then I will wait. I will improve as a person, as a businessman, as a man, and maybe one day she will change her mind." The press conference ended with a few more questions about business details, but the focus was clear. Michael Mendez had publicly chosen love over social convenience. Back at the mansion in the Hamptons 2 hours later, Michael found a scene that surprised him. Sarah was in the kitchen, trying to teach Emily how to make chocolate truffles while they watched the coverage of the press conference on the living room TV. "How did it go?" Sarah asked, not looking at him, focused on stirring the sweet mixture on the stove. "It could have been worse. We saw it on TV. You were very brave. Or very foolish, I'm still not sure." Emily tasted the truffle mixture from the pot. "It's good, Mom Sarah. And Michael, you were foolish, but in the right way." "What do you mean?" "Foolish would have been if you had hidden the truth and let the newspapers make up stories. At least this way you controlled the narrative." Michael looked at the teenager with admiration. "You should work in public relations." "I plan to, after you pay for my communications degree." "Emily!" Sarah scolded her, but she was smiling. "What?" "He said on TV that he would pay for scholarships for employees. I'm practically an employee now." The house phone rang, interrupting the light moment. It was Mrs. Thompson. "Mr. Michael, I need to speak with you urgently." "What is it?" "Your mother is coming over, and she is not alone." "What do you mean?" "She brought lawyers and journalists. I think she is going to try something." Michael closed his eyes. He had imagined that Mrs. Thompson would not accept the situation calmly, but he did not expect such a swift offensive. "How long until they get here?" "About 20 minutes. The security at the gate called to inform me." "All right. Thanks for the heads up." He hung up and found Sarah and Emily watching him with concern. "Your mother is coming," he announced. "With lawyers," Sarah guessed, turning off the heat, under the pot of chocolate truffles. "How did you know?" "Because that's exactly what a wealthy mother would do when her son ruins the family reputation because of a woman from a low-income background who is pregnant." "You are not from a low-income background, and I didn't ruin anything. To her I am, and to her you have ruined everything." Emily positioned herself between the two, hands on her hips. "Okay, people. Action plan. Sarah, you stay in the bedroom resting. Michael, you greet your mother in the living room and make it clear that your decisions will not change. I'll hide on the stairs, listening to everything and recording on my phone in case they try something illegal." "Emily, that's dangerous." "Mum Sarah, I grew up in the suburbs. I know how to recognize when someone wants to screw over my family. And now you are my family." Michael knelt in front of the girl. "Emily, I want you to know that regardless of what happens today, you will always have a place in my life. Always." "I know. You are a good guy, Michael. Just a bit slow when it comes to matters of the heart," he laughed, despite the tension. "Thanks, I think." "You're welcome. Now go get ready because I can already see the cars arriving through the window." Sarah kissed Michael's forehead before heading upstairs. "Be strong, but don't be cruel. She is your mother. And you are the woman I love. That is stronger than anything else." 5 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Michael took a deep breath and went to open the door for the battle that would define the rest of his life. Outside, Mrs. Thompson was waiting, accompanied by two men in suits, clearly lawyers, and a woman with a recorder in hand. The war had officially begun. "Hi, Mom," he said calmly. "Michael," she replied coldly. "We need to talk." "Of course. Come in." As the group entered the living room, Emily hid upstairs, phone in hand, ready to document everything necessary to protect her newly formed family. The storm approaching would be violent, but for the first time in 20 years, Michael felt prepared to face it, because now he knew exactly what he was fighting for. Mrs. Thompson entered the room like a general inspecting enemy territory. At 65, she maintained the proud posture that had characterized her throughout her life. Impeccably styled grey hair, discreet but expensive designer clothes, and that piercing gaze that had intimidated executives and competitors for decades. The two lawyers accompanying her looked like well-dressed soldiers, carrying leather briefcases and serious expressions. "Michael," she began without preamble, "this nonsense ends now." "What nonsense, Mom?" "Don't play innocent with me. You just publicly destroyed our family's reputation because of a... "Watch your words," Michael interrupted, his voice taking on a warning tone. "Because of an opportunist who took advantage of your emotional weakness," she finished, ignoring her son's tone. The older lawyer, a bald man with gold-rimmed glasses, stepped forward. "Mr. Mendez, I am Mr. Armando Wilson. I represent your mother's interests and the minority shareholders of the company. We have come to propose a solution for this situation." "What kind of solution?" Mrs. Thompson sat on the sofa as if she owned the place. "First, you will temporarily step down from the presidency of the company, citing emotional stress. Second, you will voluntarily admit yourself to a rehabilitation center to treat this unhealthy obsession. Third, you will pay a sum generous enough for this woman to disappear from your life permanently." The silence that followed was icy. Michael stared at his mother as if he were looking at a stranger. "Do you really believe I would do that?" "You will do it," she replied firmly, "because it's the only way to save what's left of our family's dignity." "Our family?" Michael laughed bitterly. "Mother, you destroyed my family 20 years ago when you intercepted Sarah's letters. Now I'm trying to rebuild a real family." The second lawyer, younger, opened his briefcase. "Mr. Mendez, we have documents here that could be problematic for Miss Sarah Johnson." "What kind of documents?" "Records that she lied on her resume when applying for the job, false claims about professional experience. Technically, this constitutes fraud." The anger Michael felt was so intense that he had to hold himself back from lunging at the man. "Did you investigate her?" "It is our obligation to protect the interests of the company," Mr. Wilson replied calmly. "And we also discovered interesting information about her financial situation, credit card debts, overdue basic bills. This could characterize an attempt at a scam." "Enough!" Michael exploded, standing up abruptly. From the staircase, Emily watched everything with her phone discreetly positioned, recording every word of the conversation. "Mother," Michael said, his voice trembling with contained rage, "I want you and these vultures out of my house right now." "Michael, be reasonable," Mrs. Thompson began. "Reasonable?" he shouted. "Do you think it's reasonable to hire investigators to rummage through a pregnant woman's life? Do you think it's reasonable to try to blackmail someone who has suffered for 20 years because of you? Because of me? I saved you from a life of mediocrity. You condemned me to 20 years of unhappiness, and now you want to do the same thing again." Mrs. Thompson stood up, her face red with indignation. "This woman is manipulating you. Can't you see? She worked for 8 months cleaning your office, knowing who you were, waiting for the perfect opportunity to pull off a scam." "The scam?" A new voice echoed through the room. Everyone turned. Sarah was on the stairs, one hand resting on the railing, wearing a simple nightgown, but with a dignity that made everyone present feel small. "Sarah, you should be resting," Michael began. "I need to hear what scam I supposedly pulled," she said, slowly descending. Mrs. Thompson looked her up and down with barely concealed contempt. "You played the victim to elicit my son's pity. You worked as a cleaner on purpose to create an image of suffering. And now you're pregnant by another man, but want him to support you and your child." Sarah reached the bottom of the stairs and walked to the center of the room, stopping directly in front of her potential mother-in-law. "You are right," she said calmly. Michael stared at her, shocked. "Sarah, I worked for 8 months knowing who he was. That's true." Mrs. Thompson smiled triumphantly. "See, she's confessing." "I worked knowing who he was," Sarah continued, "because I wanted to make sure what kind of man he had become, because I wasn't going to allow him back into my life if he was still the same cowardly boy who abandoned me pregnant 20 years ago." She turned to Michael. "And you know what I discovered? That you had become exactly what your family wanted, a rich, successful man, completely empty inside, who treated employees like furniture, who lived a perfect life on the surface and miserable inside." "Sarah," Michael whispered, "that's why I decided you didn't deserve to know who I was. Because you were no longer the man I loved." Mrs. Thompson clapped sarcastically. "What a touching performance. And now, are you going to say you changed your mind for love?" Sarah looked at her with eyes shining with determination. "No, ma'am. I changed my mind when I saw him at the hospital, desperate because I was feeling unwell. When he took me to his home, not to have me as a mistress, but to care for me as if I were family. When he had the courage to face all of New York, to publicly acknowledge our relationship." She walked over to Michael and took his hand. "I changed my mind when I realized he had become the man he always had the potential to be. Not for me, but despite you." Mr. Wilson cleared his throat. "Very romantic, but that doesn't change the legal facts. We have enough evidence to sue Miss Johnson for fraud and attempted extortion." That's when Emily appeared at the top of the stairs, calmly descending while fiddling with her phone. "How interesting," she said casually. "Because I recorded this entire conversation, and I'm sure the newspapers will love to know how a wealthy family tries to destroy a pregnant woman using lawyers and blackmail." All eyes turned to the teenager. "Emily," Sarah began. "Oh, and I already sent the audio to 3 different journalists. Just as a precaution," she added with an angelic smile. Mr. Wilson paled. This could be considered legal?" Emily interrupted him. "Of course it is. You were in Michael's house. He didn't ask for privacy, and you were threatening my family. In self-defense, I would say." Mrs. Thompson looked at the girl as if she were a venomous snake. "Who do you think you are, you little brat? I am Sarah's daughter, and Michael's future stepdaughter, and unlike you, I know what family loyalty means." Michael walked over to Emily and put his hand on her shoulder. "And I am proud to have her as my daughter." "Daughter?" Mrs. Thompson repeated, horrified. "Michael, you have completely lost your sense of reality." "No, Mother. I gained a sense of reality for the first time in 20 years. He turned to the lawyers. "I want you to leave my house now, and if you attempt any legal action against Sarah or Emily, I will use all my resources to destroy your careers. Is that clear?" Mr. Wilson quickly packed up the documents. "Mr. Mendez, perhaps we should reconsider." "There's nothing to reconsider. Get out." Mrs. Thompson remained seated, refusing to move. "I'm not leaving until you regain your senses." "Then you might be here for a long time," Sarah said softly, "because he has finally found his reason." "And do you think he will be happy?" Mrs. Thompson turned to Sarah with venom in her voice. Do you think a wealthy man like my son will settle for a simple life? That he won't grow tired of you when the novelty wears off? Maybe yes, Sarah answered honestly. Maybe it won't work out. Maybe in a few years he'll realize he prefers a life that's more socially acceptable. Sarah, Michael protested. But, she continued, the difference is that this time it will be his choice. No manipulation, no family pressure, no lies. If he leaves me, it will be because he wants to, not because he was forced. And what if I leave you? Michael asked softly. Sarah smiled, touching her belly. Then I will raise my child, finish my education, become a teacher, and live happily my way, because I learned that I don't need a man to be whole, but I choose to have you because you make me happy, not because I need you. Mrs. Thompson stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. Michael, this woman will ruin you. No, Mother, she will save me. And what if I cut ties? What if you are never welcome in the family again? Michael looked at Sarah and Emily by his side, then at his mother. Then I will feel sorry for you, because you will lose the chance to meet your grandchildren. You will lose the chance to have a real family based on love, not appearances. Your grandchildren, she repeated, incredulous. Sarah's baby, the children I plan to have with her, and Emily, whom I already consider my daughter. You can't be serious. Emily stepped forward. Mrs. Thompson, can I give you a piece of advice? From you, Careful, Michael warned. An intelligent girl who grew up without privileges but with dignity. Emily finished the old lady's sentence. The advice is, accept it already, because whether you like it or not, we are Michael's family now, and the sooner you accept it, the sooner you can meet your grandchildren. Mrs. Thompson looked around the room, at her determined son, at the pregnant woman radiating strength, at the teenager speaking with wisdom beyond her years. For a moment, something resembling doubt crossed her face. And if I tried to accept, would you give me a chance? The silence that followed was heavy with possibilities. Sarah was the first to speak. Mrs. Thompson, I'm not going to pretend that I forgive you for what you did 20 years ago. I'm not going to pretend that I approve of your methods today, but... She paused, looking at Michael. If you really want to try to be a present and loving grandmother, our children deserve to know the whole family. But, Emily added firmly, no trying to separate them, no nasty comments, and definitely no private investigators. Mrs. Thompson looked at the lawyers who were waiting for her instructions. You can go, she finally said. We cancel any legal action. After the men left, an uncomfortable silence settled in the room. That doesn't mean I approve, Mrs. Thompson finally said. We don't expect you to approve, Michael replied. We just hope you respect us. And that you learn to know us before judging us, Sarah added. Mrs. Thompson nodded slowly. All right, I will try. Emily smiled for the first time since the woman arrived. Great! Do you want to stay for lunch? Sarah is teaching me how to make lasagna. I don't know. Come on, Grandma, Emily said, testing the title. You better get used to the new family. And despite everything, the tension, the resentments, the uncertainty about the future, Mrs. Thompson smiled back. It was a start. Perhaps not the beginning she had planned for her family, but a beginning nonetheless. All right, she said. I'll stay for lunch. And as Sarah and Emily returned to the kitchen, hesitantly followed by Mrs. Thompson, Michael stood alone in the room for a moment, watching his family form before his eyes. It was chaotic, complicated, and absolutely imperfect. It was exactly what he had always wanted without knowing it. 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation with Mrs. Thompson, and the house in the Hamptons had transformed into something completely different. Mornings now began with the aroma of brewed coffee from a cloth filter. Sarah had insisted on teaching Michael how to make real coffee, and the sound of Emily studying for her college entrance exam at the kitchen table, surrounded by books borrowed from the public library. It was a Thursday at the end of January when Sarah woke up at 5 in the morning with a pain different from the false contractions she had felt in recent weeks. She was lying on her side in the king-size bed of the master bedroom. Michael had insisted she stay in the larger room while he occupied the guest room, when she felt something wet trickle down her legs. "Michael," she called, her voice cutting through the silence of the early morning. He appeared in the doorway within seconds, wearing only a t-shirt and sleep shorts, his hair tousled. "What is it? Are you okay?" I think my water broke." His face paled instantly. During the 3 weeks of living together, they had rehearsed this moment several times, but now that it was really happening, all the preparations seemed to evaporate. "Does it hurt?" he asked, moving closer to the bed. "A little, but it's different from the other times." Sarah tried to sit up, grimacing as another contraction hit. "I think this time it's serious." "Emily!" Michael shouted. "I'm awake!" came the response from the next room. The teenager appeared seconds later, already wearing jeans and a t-shirt, holding a ready backpack. "The hospital bag is here, the documents are here, and I already called Dr. Henry. He'll meet you at the maternity ward." "How were you already ready?" Michael asked, impressed. "Because I pay attention to things, unlike you two who make a drama out of everything." False contraction? Sarah laughed in the middle of a contraction. "This girl is going places." "I really am. Now let's go, before my little brother decides to be born in the car." The trip to Mount Sinai Hospital was a blur of burned red lights, Michael driving like a Formula One pilot, while Sarah breathed steadily in the passenger seat and Emily timed the contractions on her phone. 4 minutes between each one, she announced. "It's speeding up." "How much longer?" Sarah asked, squeezing Michael's hand. 2 blocks, he replied, taking a sharp turn that made the tires squeal. "Michael, promise me one thing. Anything you want. If something goes wrong with me—" "Nothing is going to go wrong," he interrupted, firmly. "But if it does, take care of Emily and the baby. Promise?" "I promise, but nothing will go wrong, because you are the strongest woman I know." "Oh, how sweet," Emily commented from the back seat. "Now stop talking nonsense, Mom Sarah, because we've arrived." Dr. Henry was waiting for them at the entrance of the maternity ward with a team of nurses and a wheelchair. Within minutes, Sarah was in a private room, being examined while Michael and Emily waited outside. "How are you doing?" Dr. Henry asked as he exited the room. "How is she?" Michael corrected. "She's great. 6 centimeters dilation, the baby's heartbeat is normal. Everything indicates a normal delivery without complications." "How much longer?" Emily wanted to know. "A few hours. First babies always take a bit longer." "Actually," a familiar voice echoed down the hallway, "this isn't her first baby." Everyone turned. Mrs. Thompson was walking toward them carrying a basket of fruit and wearing an elegant outfit, but there was something different in her expression. The 3 weeks of forced coexistence had softened some of her sharper edges. "Grandma!" Emily ran to hug her. "How did you know the baby was coming?" "Michael called me on the way here," she replied, returning the girl's embrace, "and I came as soon as I could." "Thank you for coming, Mom," Michael said, and for the first time in weeks, his voice didn't carry tension when he spoke to her. "How could I miss the birth of my first grandchild?" Dr. Henry looked confused between them. "Sorry, but when you said it wasn't her first child—" Mrs. Thompson sighed deeply. 20 years ago, Sarah got pregnant with Michael, but she lost the baby a few weeks after he left. She never had another child besides. Emily, who is adopted. I see. The doctor nodded professionally. Well, technically it's still considered a first-term delivery, so the expected time remains the same. A nurse appeared at the door of the room. "The father can come in now." Michael hesitated. Technically, I'm not the biological father. You are the father she chose, Emily said firmly. Get in there before she freaks out. When Michael entered the room, he found Sarah connected to monitors, but conscious and determined. She reached out her hand to him. You came. Of course I did. Where else would I be? I don't know. It's strange. 20 years ago you weren't here when I lost our baby. Now you're here for the birth of another man's child. This isn't another man's child, Michael said, kissing her sweaty forehead. It's our child. From the moment I decided to love you again. A stronger contraction made Sarah squeeze his hand with enough force to cut off circulation. Jesus, she groaned. How do women do this voluntarily? Because it's worth it, an experienced nurse replied, checking the monitors. When you hold that baby, you'll forget all the pain. The next 4 hours passed in a succession of increasingly intense contractions, controlled breathing, and the nurse coming in periodically to check dilation. Throughout it all, Michael stayed by Sarah's side, holding her hand, wiping her sweat, whispering words of encouragement. Michael, she said during a pause between contractions, what if he looks like Marcus? What if every time you look at him, you remember he's not yours? Then I'll remember that love has nothing to do with DNA, he replied. I'll remember that you chose me to be his father, and that's more important than any genetics. What if I'm not a good mother? Sarah, you've raised Emily since she was 13. You worked 3 jobs to give her education and dignity. You're the best mother I know. Dr. Henry entered the room for another examination. 10 centimeters, he announced. It's time. What followed was a blur of medical instructions, strength, pain, and determination. Sarah pushed with a force Michael didn't know she possessed, while he whispered encouragement in her ear. I see the head, Dr. Henry announced. One more time, Sarah. Push! And then at 2:37 p.m. on a sunny Thursday in January, Lorenzo Johnson entered the world with a strong, indignant cry that echoed through the room like a victory announcement. It's a boy, Dr. Henry exclaimed, lifting the baby for the parents to see. Michael openly wept when he saw the tiny human screaming, covered in blood but perfectly formed. He had his mother's olive skin, dark hair like coal, and a pair of lungs that promised sleepless nights. He's perfect, Michael whispered. Do you want to cut the umbilical cord? The nurse offered. With trembling hands, Michael cut the physical link between mother and child, symbolically taking on the role that would be his from then on, to protect and care for both. When they placed Lorenzo in Sarah's arms, she looked at her son with an expression of pure love and exhaustion. Hi, my love, she whispered to the baby. I'm your mommy. And I'm your daddy, Michael added, gently touching the little boy's tiny closed fist. Immediately, Lorenzo stopped crying and opened his eyes, big, dark, and curious, staring at the 2 adults who watched him with adoration. I think that he approves, Sarah laughed through her tears. The bedroom door opened and Emily burst in like a whirlwind, followed more calmly by Mrs. Thompson. Where's my brother? Emily asked, rushing to the bed. Here he is, Sarah said, turning the baby so Emily could see. Wow, he's beautiful and tiny. Hi, Lorenzo. I'm your big sister, and I'm going to teach you all about how to charm Mom and Dad to get what you want. Emily! Sarah and Michael protested together. Mrs. Thompson approached more slowly, a look of reverence on her face. Can I hold him? Sarah looked at Michael, who nodded encouragingly. Of course, Grandma. When Mrs. Thompson held Lorenzo for the first time, something fundamental changed in her expression. All the hardness, all the prejudice, all the resistance she had maintained in the past weeks simply vanished. He's beautiful, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Absolutely perfect. Want to know something interesting? Dr. Henry commented, observing the family scene. Babies recognize voices they heard during gestation. He probably already knows all of you. As if to confirm the doctor's observation, Lorenzo snuggled comfortably in his grandmother's arms, his little eyes lazily closing. I think he approves of me too, Mrs. Thompson said with a mix of surprise and joy. Of course he does, Emily said. You're his family. Family. The word echoed in the room, like a blessing. Here were 4 people who didn't share blood, except for Lorenzo, but who had chosen to love and care for each other despite all the differences and difficulties. Michael, Sarah said softly, thank you. For what? For being here. For being the father he deserves. For giving us a real family. Michael kissed her forehead, then gently kissed Lorenzo's head. Thank you, he replied, for letting me be part of the most amazing family in the world. Outside the bedroom window, New York buzzed with its usual hustle and bustle. Cars honking, people rushing, urban life following its relentless rhythm. But inside, time had stopped to celebrate the oldest and newest miracle in the world, the birth of a child and the creation of a family based on love. Lorenzo Johnson had arrived, bringing with him the promise that sometimes, just sometimes, stories really do have happy endings, even if it takes 20 years to wait for them. 6 months after Lorenzo's birth, spring in New York arrived with its irregular rains and the scent of flowers blooming in the gardens of the Hamptons. Sunday morning was particularly bright when Sarah woke to the familiar sound of Lorenzo grumbling in the crib beside the bed, not crying yet, just making his morning noises that indicated he was awake and assessing whether it was worth complaining about food. At 6 months, Lorenzo had become a chubby, smiling baby, with round cheeks and a personality that already showed traits of his mother's determination and his adoptive father's stubbornness. His hair had grown into dark curls that Emily insisted on styling differently every day, and his eyes had settled into a deep brown reminiscent of Sarah's. "Good morning, my prince," Sarah murmured, picking him up before he decided to cry for real. "Is Daddy still sleeping?" As if he had heard the question, Michael appeared in the bedroom doorway wearing shorts and a t-shirt, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Daddy's been awake for an hour making coffee for Mommy," he said, planting a kiss on Sarah's forehead and another on Lorenzo's head. "And thinking about how life has completely changed in a year." It was true. The household routine had transformed completely with the arrival of the baby. Mornings began at 6 with feedings, followed by the sacred coffee ritual in the kitchen, while Lorenzo napped a bit longer in his stroller. Emily, now 17 and in her senior year of high school, had adapted to the role of big sister with a naturalness that surprised everyone. "Where's our teenager?" Sarah asked, sitting in the nursing chair that Michael had bought. A ridiculously expensive Italian piece that she had protested was unnecessary but secretly loved. "Preparing her famous Sunday cake. She said today is special because it marks exactly 1 year since you all moved here." 1 year, Sarah repeated thoughtfully, feels like a lifetime. And it feels like it was yesterday. They were both right in their feelings. The last year had been a roller coaster of changes, adaptations, and discoveries. Michael's company had undergone a complete restructuring. The salary increases and employee benefits had resulted in a temporary drop in profits, but also a significant increase in productivity and employee loyalty. 3 business magazines had already featured articles on the Mendes model of humane management. Sarah had resumed her studies through an online degree in education, taking advantage of Lorenzo's naps to attend classes and complete assignments. It was exhausting to balance motherhood with studies, but she was determined to graduate and pursue her dream of becoming a teacher. "Michael," she said, adjusting Lorenzo to, "Nurse, can I ask you something?" Always. Do you have any regrets about everything that has changed in your life? It was a question she asked periodically, and Michael always answered without hesitation. None. The only regret I have is that it took me 20 years to find the courage. Even with all the media chaos, the criticism from other business people, your mother having to get used to such a different daughter-in-law. Michael sat on the bed, watching the woman he loved feeding the son he considered completely his. Sarah, do you know when I was absolutely sure I had made the right choice? When? 3 weeks ago, when you were at the hospital with Lorenzo because of bronchiolitis. Do you remember how desperate I was? She recalled. Lorenzo had developed a common respiratory infection in infants, which required 3 days of hospitalization. Michael had stayed at the hospital the entire time, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair, refusing to go home, even when the doctors assured him everything was fine. That night, when you finally managed to sleep and I was holding Lorenzo while he was getting his nebulizer treatment, I realized that baby was my son in every way. That truly matters, not because we share DNA, but because I chose to love him unconditionally. And that doesn't scare you, the responsibility. It terrifies me, he admitted with a smile. Every day, but it's a good terror, you know? It's the terror of someone who has something too important to lose. Lorenzo finished nursing, and Michael picked him up to burp him, a skill he had developed with more expertise than many biological parents. And you? He asked. Any regrets? Sarah thought for a moment, watching Michael quietly talk to Lorenzo while patting his back. Just one. What is it? Not reaching out to you when I found out you were in New York. Maybe we could have avoided some years of unnecessary suffering. Maybe. Or maybe we weren't ready yet. Maybe we needed to live through everything we did to get to this point. Michael's philosophy on timing was proving to be accurate. In the past few months, they had discovered they knew each other much better as adults than as teenagers. Their life rhythms fit perfectly. Sarah was an early riser and organizer, while Michael was a night owl and dreamer. She made him more practical and grounded, while he encouraged her to dream bigger and trust herself more. "Family!" Emily's voice echoed from downstairs. "Special breakfast is ready." They went down to the kitchen and found a table worthy of a decor magazine. Carrot cake with chocolate frosting, artistically cut fruits, homemade bread that Emily had learned to make by watching videos on YouTube, and freshly squeezed orange juice. "Wow, Em!" Sarah exclaimed. "What a treat!" "It's a special day," the teenager replied, placing Lorenzo in the high chair. "It's been a year since we became a real family." "Technically, we've been a family longer than that," Michael noted. "No, we haven't. Family isn't just living together or liking each other. Family is when you are absolutely certain that the other people will be there no matter what happens." Emily's maturity never ceased to amaze the adults. At 17, she had an understanding of relationships that many people took decades to develop. "And when did you have that certainty?" Sarah asked. "When Lorenzo was born, and you guys let me choose his middle name. At that moment, I understood that I wasn't just an addition to your family. I was part of it." Lorenzo Johnson. The full name carried the history of all of them. Johnson for Michael and Mendez for Sarah. It was a small rebellion against social conventions, but it perfectly symbolized how that family had been built, with love, choice, and respect for each person's history. The phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was Mrs. Thompson. "Good morning, Grandma," Michael answered. "Good morning, dear. How are my grandchildren?" Mrs. Thompson's transformation had been spectacular. After Lorenzo's birth, she had dedicated herself to the role of grandmother with a passion that surprised even herself. She visited the house twice a week, had learned to prepare bottles and change diapers, and spoiled both Emily and Lorenzo with gifts and attention. "They're great. Do you want to talk to them?" "Of course." Michael passed the phone to Emily, who began to report to Grandma every detail of the week, as if it were an official report. It was a routine the two had developed, which had helped Emily have a grandmother figure she had never had before. While Emily chatted on the phone, Sarah and Michael took the opportunity to have a moment alone. "There's something I haven't told you," he said, cutting a piece of cake. "What is it?" "I received an interesting offer this week." "What kind of offer?" "An American consulting firm wants to hire our company to implement the Mendes model in other corporations. It's a 5-year contract that will bring in more money than we've earned in the last 3 years together." Sarah nearly choked on her coffee. "Really? That's amazing." "It is. But there's a catch." "What?" "It means traveling a lot, at least 2 weeks a month out of the country." The silence that followed was laden with implications. It was an extraordinary professional opportunity, but it would put pressure on the family they were building. "And what do you want to do?" "I want to decline." "Why?" "Because I spent 20 years prioritizing career over personal happiness. I'm not going to make the same mistake again." Sarah studied his face. Looking for signs of resentment or doubt, she found none. "Michael, this could be the chance of your life professionally." "Sarah, you and the kids are the chance of my life, professionally, personally, in every sense." "But what if—" She was interrupted by Lorenzo starting to fuss in the high chair. Michael immediately got up to pick him up, making silly faces that made the baby let out one of his delightful laughs. "See," Michael said, "why do I need to conquer the world when I already have the whole world right here?" Emily hung up the phone and returned to the table. "Grandma wants to know if you guys have set a wedding date." It was a question that had been postponed for months. Michael had proposed to Sarah 2 weeks after Lorenzo's birth, but she had asked for time to adjust to motherhood before planning a wedding. "Actually," Sarah said, looking at Michael, and then at Emily, "I think I know when I want to get married." "When?" they asked together. "On the day of the church's June festival, in June." "Why?" Michael asked. "Because it was at a summer festival that we met. Because it was in a photo from the summer festival that we reconnected. And because—" She smiled, touching his hand. "Because I want our story to come full circle." "Summer festival at the Church of the Sacred Heart?" Emily asked excitedly. "The one where you guys met?" "Exactly. A simple wedding at the community church, followed by a party. With chicken croquettes, spiced hot cider, and country dance." Michael laughed, kissing her hand. "It's going to be perfect." "Grandma is going to freak out," Emily observed. "She must be expecting something at the Plaza Hotel." "Grandma will adapt," Sarah said confidently. "She has learned to love our family the way we are. She will learn to love our wedding the way we want it." Lorenzo chose that moment to let out one of his best laughs, as if he completely approved of the family's plans. "I think we have unanimous approval," Michael said. "Approval for what?" A familiar voice echoed from the kitchen entrance. It was David, Lorenzo's biological father. For the past 6 months, he had established a routine of bi-weekly visits, always prearranged, always respectful, always focused on the child's well-being. The situation had been strange at first, but everyone had adapted to the unconventional dynamic. "David!" Emily stood up. "You arrived early today." "The flight from Washington, D.C. left on time for the first time in months," he explained, greeting everyone. "How's my boy?" Michael passed Lorenzo to David without hesitation. In the early meetings it had been uncomfortable, but over time they had developed a cordial relationship based on what was best for the child. "He's getting smarter every day," David noted, making Lorenzo laugh. "And growing fast." "He is," Sarah agreed. "He's almost sitting up by himself." "And drooling on everything in sight," Emily added. David stayed for an hour, playing with Lorenzo and chatting with the family. When he prepared to leave, he pulled Michael aside. "Can I tell you something?" "Sure. Thank you." "For what?" "For being the father I couldn't be. For giving him and Sarah the family they deserve." Michael studied the younger man's face, seeing genuine sincerity in his eyes. "David, you are always welcome here. Lorenzo is lucky to have two fathers who care about him." "No, man. I'm the uncle who shows up occasionally with gifts. You are the father who is here every day, who wakes up in the middle of the night when he cries, who will be present in every stage of his life." It was an important distinction, and Michael accepted it with gratitude. "Thank you for understanding that. Thank you for making it easy." After David left, the family returned to their Sunday routine. Emily studying for the college entrance exam. In the living room, Lorenzo napping in the stroller, Sarah organizing the week's clothes, and Michael reading company reports on the terrace. By late afternoon, as the sun began to set, they gathered in the garden for the ritual they had created, the Sunday gratitude. Each person would say one thing they were grateful for that week. "I'm grateful for Lorenzo being healthy and happy," Sarah began. "I'm grateful for our family preparing to formalize our union," Michael continued. "I am grateful for passing the first phase of the college entrance exam for journalism," Emily added. "And I'm grateful," Michael said, looking at Lorenzo peacefully sleeping in the stroller, "for learning that family is not about blood or social conventions. It's about love, commitment, and choosing every day to be present in the lives of the people who matter." "To a crazy patchwork family," Sarah toasted with her cup of tea. "To the most perfect family in the world," Michael replied. And as the sun set over New York, painting the sky pink and orange, four people who had found each other in unexpected ways silently celebrated the miracle of belonging somewhere. In June, at the summer festival at the Church of the Sacred Heart, Michael and Sarah would formalize what had already been real for months. There would be a bonfire, country dance, spiced hot cider, and the same community that had witnessed the beginning of their story. But that autumn Sunday, with Lorenzo sleeping in the garden and Emily making plans for college, they were already everything they had always dreamed of being. A real family, built with love, patience, and the courage to believe that sometimes the best stories begin with happy endings.